There we go. We are live. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining in. We're in our pre-show for today's 220-1102 Core 2 A Plus study group. That's a lot. 220-1102, which is Core 2. It is A Plus. It is a study group. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. I am just getting things ready to go. You can see we're at about 10 minutes before the hour starts. So the pre-show begins now. Oh, I should probably put, let's put up, hi. Yeah, yep. See, it's not even ready to go yet. Let's put up this view so I can see myself. Hey, self. We'll put in the poll. There it is. So that you can put your virtual pin in the map. And let's see what we're doing here. I have all new questions today from Core 2. Hey, chat room. How's everybody doing? Just waved at you like you could see me. I guess technically you could see me, but not you. You know what I'm saying. So we are now ready to get started. I think I've got everything ready to go. Let's do one last check of things. This time we have video. We did not have the video last time, but that's the beauty of doing the Core 1 2 days ago. Got all of the things out of the way. It's very bright under there. You can actually see under my door. There's a lot of light coming in. Not much I can do about that. That's just how it's going to be. Yeah, the door's it seems like the door is right there, right behind my desk, but it's not. It's actually over there. But it's just looks weird at that angle, doesn't it? Kind of unusual. I gotta change that. That's my bird cam. Hey, bird cam. Hey. I have to change that around, and I have to change it. It's on a stand. It's not on a stand technically. It was on a stand, and then I put in a piece of furniture so that I could actually put things on it that I use for the live stream, and I put it in backwards. I need to turn it around. I intentionally did that, but now I need to turn it around and actually adjust the camera. But adjusting a camera involves sitting here and playing with the camera, and that's something you really don't want to do just prior to a live stream. So there it is, and it looks fine. It's just from my perspective, you can't see it. It's on this stand, and the stand is backwards. But that's one of those things. The studio is never finished. The studio is always in some type of flux, and I think that's just normal. How's everybody doing in the chat room? Hello, hello. Milton's going to test on the 15th. Your last study group before the big day. So I hope this goes well. Hope this goes okay. I think it should. I've got good questions for you. We'll see how this goes. I think this is always a good one. And of course, you can go back to the list of all of the things that we have here. What certificates do I have? A lot of the certs I have, I think these days would not be valid because I don't tend to get newer certs other than what we currently have. So I have my old A Plus, Network Plus, Security Plus. In fact, I don't even know if I kept them up. I may have to take those exams again just so I have them, just so I can say that I have them, because I don't think I renewed the last set. But that's okay. I'll have to do that someday and get those there. But you know, I've in my list of certs, and I do have a file somewhere with all the certs in it. I have Microsoft certs and Cisco certs and Palo Alto Network certs and McAfee certs, although at the time I think it was Network Associates certifications. There's some of the old CNX certs. Don't know about those, do you? Those go way back. Back when dinosaurs ruled the earth, we had certifications on Ethernet, Token Ring, FIDI, ATM, network cabling. Was there another one? Maybe that was it. Maybe it was those 5. They might have added a couple of others. I had those CNX certs at the time too. And those were kind of fun. A lot of folks checking in from the U.S. We got folks in India, folks in South Africa. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for being here. We'll get started here in about 5 minutes. Get things going. 5 minutes and 15 seconds. There is all new questions today for the 220-1102 exam. Oh, yes, the 601 retirement. For those of you working on Security Plus will be retired. There's our 5-minute warning. Security Plus will be retired on July 31st. So we have about a month and a half or so, month and 3/4 before that one goes away. So a lot of people are working really hard to get their 601 done before it disappears, which is great. Obviously, the 701 is out. It's been out for a long time, but it's been out since November. But if you were already studying the 601, why would you switch? Just finish your 601 studies, take that exam, get Security Plus certified, and you're done for 3 years. So no, it would not be better to wait. Well, you wouldn't wait for the 701. The 701's been out since November. There's no waiting. You just choose. Which one do you want to do? 601 or 701? Pick one. Now, if you're starting right now and you've never looked at Security Plus and you're thinking, which one of these do I take? You take the 701 because the 601 is retiring on July 31st. That's not enough time. That's not enough time to get everything done if you are really starting from the very beginning. So that's what I would recommend. And that way, the 701 is not going to retire for another 3 years. I think you could probably get it done before 3 years goes by. That's what I'm thinking. I believe in you. I don't know anyone who's taken 3 years to take their certification exam. On average, it usually takes 2 to 3 months. So, if you really, really, really applied yourself, I guess you could take the 601, but why would you do that? Why would you put yourself in that position? Instead, focus on the 701 and you're fine. Do I have a video on 3D printing? Well, on the Core 1, there is, a couple of bullets on 3D. No, not even a couple. There's one bullet on 3D printing. That's all I have. So I don't go into any detail with 3D printing. It's a broad overview. Here's this 3D printer type and here's this 3D printer type. And they all use this. They use this to print with. That's about it. There's not much more in there. Do you think CompTIA would accept my getting an article published in 2600 to count towards the continuing education credit? Sure, that's a legit reason to have that. I think that's perfectly reasonable for CE, for continuing education credit. 601 retires, because that's an exam version. The exam version retires on July 31st. So if you took the 601 exam on July 31st and you passed it, you would be Security Plus certified for 3 years because it doesn't matter what they do to the exam version once you are certified. Once you earn your certification, who cares what they do with the exams? They could change it every day. I'm glad they don't, but they could. They could change it every day. It wouldn't affect you because you're already certified. So that's it. Do I use Linux? Well, if you're on ProfessorMesser.com right now, you are on Linux. So there you go. We run whatever makes sense here. So we have Linux, we have Windows, we have Mac OS, we have Android, we have iOS. We run a lot of different operating systems. So that's pretty normal. And most of what we do with Linux is very server-based, but occasionally I will start up, and I certainly have in my list of VMs a couple of Linux VMs in there because there's certain things that you might want to demonstrate or show or play around with, and it only works in Linux. And so I've got one ready to go there. I also have a Windows VM. I also run Mac OS on my primary desktop. So you just never know. We'll figure out what the deal is with that once it happens. What was my first PC? Hard to know what, because first one I owned or first one I ever touched or first one that I had a chance to play around with. Those are differences because, when personal computing became popular, it was very expensive. And it took a while for me to finally be able to afford to purchase a computer back in the day. IT professionals should be using Linux, right? They should be using everything. You should know Linux, you should know Mac OS, you should know Windows at a minimum. And then iOS and Android you can add to that list. You should know all of them. There's not any one operating system that's any better or worse than the other. And you will find all of these operating systems at every company you go to. There's no company in the world that is all Windows or all Linux or all Mac OS. It's a mix. So if you want to be the best possible technologist and eventually the best possible networking professional and the best possible security professional, then you need to know as much as possible about so many different operating systems. Just makes sense. Look at that, 12 noon. Boom. Time for a live stream, everybody. Let's see if we can get things going. We need to pause this. We need to bring up the screen, and let's do it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 2024 Professor Messer 220-1102. That is our Core 2 A+ study group. Thank you for joining us. Today, I have questions for you that are ready to go from the Core 2 exam objectives. I have both questions in this first hour that you will be able to answer online with us. And I also have questions that I will answer from you in the second hour. So if you are already working towards that second hour and you're thinking, I have a question I would like to ask, you could always pop open this window, pop open a new browser window and go to this URL. Go to professormesser.com/QA. That's where we will be answering questions, and that's where I will take your question. There's a tab at the top of the screen that you can use to submit a question. This QA link that you see here is the one that we use to answer all of the questions today. So all you have to do is visit that one page, and all of the questions on that page will change based on what I type here on my screen. So you don't have to go to multiple URLs. Everything will be right there in front of you and ready to go. In fact, I have for you a question already there, and it is waiting for you. All you have to do is follow along with this question that we call our rewind question, because it's a question that we had in a previous study group. This rewind question asks, a website has posted this string of text next to a download link. And there's just this long list of hexadecimal numbers, letters and numbers there. It's all hex. Which of the following best describes this information? Is that a session ID, a file header, an integrity check, a download counter, or a decryption key? Could be any of those, right? We just don't know. But you will be able to answer it by visiting that URL. Go to professormesser.com/QA, lock in what you think the answer is. Our standard rule in effect is to not answer in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you follow that URL and you can answer the question right there. We will be coming back to that question in just a moment. So stick with us and we'll find out what the answer to that one happens to be. Well, thanks for joining us. We're so glad you were able to carve out some time, either when you're watching this live with us today or if you're watching this on the replay. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, we have a lot of things that are happening throughout the month and not just one of these live streams. We do live streams all the time, but you can find, of course, all of our training videos and watch every minute of every video on our YouTube channel. Go to professormesser.com/YouTube, and you could even subscribe to the channel, which would make my day. I would love it if you subscribe today. There's also daily A+ pop quiz questions. You can go to professormesser.com/Twitter. That's what they used to call it back in the day. professormesser.com/Instagram, professormesser.com/LinkedIn. You could just type in professormesser.com/something, and you'll probably find us there if we happen to have an account on that particular site. It's a great way to follow us, keep track of what's going on. We try to find out where you are so that you can find us so much easier. Now, sometime during this first hour, I will give you instructions on how you can earn a continuing education unit credit. This only applies if you already have an A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus exam, and you've already passed that. You already have the cert, and you need some way to renew these certifications. That's what this is for. So this is something I do recommend you read through so you understand the different options available for renewing. There's a lot of ways to renew your cert, not just by collecting CEUs, but there's other ways that you could do it. But this is a great thing to listen in for during this first hour, where I will give you instructions on how you can earn a 1-hour webinar category CEU. Today, we're going to talk about the A+ exam. All the questions today are from the A+ exam, specifically the 220-1102 exam. If you were here 2 days ago on our live stream, we did questions from the 220-1101. And of course, you can go to our YouTube channel and watch the replay of that one. This exam was released on April the 20th of 2022. So it's been around about a year at this point. We also have an estimated retirement date. If we count 3.5 years from release, that puts the retirement somewhere in the range of November of 2025. Now, although that seems like a long way away, I guess because it is, the thing that's important to know about that is that if you are currently studying for your 220-1101 or you're studying for your 220-1102, you have plenty of time. They're not going to pull the rug out from underneath you. You will certainly have plenty of time to finish up your studies. So you're really good shape right there. So I think that's another good idea as we're going through and understanding more about these exams. It's useful to know when these exams might change. And that's certainly a good date to keep in mind. Always check the CompTIA website if you want to know more details about when the retirement date might be. And as it gets closer, we will be able to get that date a little bit tighter. I, of course, keep track of what CompTIA is thinking as well. And if they change things on their side, I'll change things on my side too. It's in these exams for A+, you have both an A+ Core 1 and A+ Core 2. They're both identical in their time requirements, 90 minutes per exam. The 220-1102, you have to score a 700 on a scale between 100 and 900. So you've got a few options there. This is one, by the way, hard to reverse engineer that. And I think that's by design. The idea is just do the best you can, and hopefully it comes out to be a 700 or better. The exam itself, once you pass the exam, as we mentioned earlier, that certification is good for 3 years after your exam date. So that's a good way to keep in mind how long it will be before you have to make sure that you renew that certification. Today, we're talking about topics that come from the 220-1102 exam. That's the one right there under my shoulder. This is the Core 2 exam. We kind of give it that summary of Core 2. This is going to cover operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. So we're going to try to cover all of those different topics during this live stream today. So be ready for questions from all of those different domains. There will be a replay available of this immediately afterwards on YouTube. Just happens automatically when I hit the stop button. I also create an audio-only replay that I distribute in podcast format. And if you would like to add this to your podcast listening program, you can simply visit professormesser.com/podcast, and you can load our A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus podcasts into that podcast listening app. Now, if you are already on one of the streaming audio services, maybe you're on Spotify, you can simply search for Professor Messer. We're already in the Spotify library, so you can easily play it from there as well. They'll also let you know that about a day after this live stream is over, you'll be able to go to YouTube and look at the YouTube video description to be able to see all of the timestamps for the questions, the answers, and everything else that we do during this event. So if you are trying to find things very, very quickly, it will allow you to find those. You can hunt those down and be able to know exactly where that happens to be in this list. This doesn't happen automatically. It's my marketing manager, Lori, who's listening to this replay right now, probably at 2x speed. Do I sound funny? And she is going through and putting those timestamps in so that you will have access to those about a day later. I think that's a pretty valuable way. And if you like that, feel free to give Lori a shout out in the chat room, because that's a great way to let her know that her efforts are not wasted too. And I've already told her a million times her efforts aren't wasted. We love having those timestamps there. It's good stuff. And it's also something that can help you find things even faster. And that's our goal here, is to get you certified. This is also something you might want to keep in mind when we're not doing a live stream. You can find us on Discord. If you haven't joined our Discord channel, our Discord server, it's a great place to study with other people, and it's a fantastic community of technologists. You can join us at professormesser.com/Discord, or simply choose the Discord icon in the upper right of the Professor Messer website. Eventually, you will need to take your exam, and something that you'll have to do to earn that certification. And if you are in the US, Canada, or a US territory, you can purchase a discounted exam voucher from the Professor Messer website. Now, of course, you could go to the CompTIA website and pay full price. I'm not sure why you would do that when we have discounted vouchers available at professormesser.com. Not only do you get your voucher at a discount and save some money, I also give you a little bit more, something you can't get on the CompTIA website, which is my Exam Hacks ebook. This Exam Hacks ebook is a list of tips, tricks, and other life hacks that I've created based on my history of taking certification exams. I even have some tips in there that might help you score more points during the exam itself. So it's always good to have a strategy. Hopefully some of these strategies can help you. You can find that all on my website at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question we asked earlier, which is, a website has posted this string of text next to a download link. And there's a big string of text right there. And the question is, which of the following best describes this information? Is this session ID, file header, integrity check, download counter, or decryption key? Which one of those is that? Let's see what you chose. I'm going to stop the poll and we'll see what you decided it was. 54% of you say this is an integrity check. This is a much larger percentage than we had in the last live stream. 18% say that's a decryption key. 16% say that's a session ID. 9%, almost 10% say it's a file header. And then only 1% say it's a download counter. Don't we miss the download counters? I like having the download counters. If you see one of these very long strings of text next to a download link, it's giving you a hash. That hash is something that you can use if you download the file. You can run your own hashing algorithm against that downloaded file and see if it matches the one on the website. And if it does match, you know that the file that you downloaded is exactly the same file as what exists on that website. This is something incredibly useful to do. In fact, here's a good example of some hashes that are on the Ubuntu site. If you're downloading a Linux distribution from that site, they include the SHA-256 sums or the SHA-256 hashes so that you're able to run the same SHA-256 algorithm on your computer and see if it matches that. So let's run that. I've got these hashes. I also have downloaded a hashing program from the Microsoft Store. I just downloaded a free one they happen to have there. This one's called Hash Checker. They didn't spend a lot of time on the name, but I guess that's good. We know exactly what it does. It checks the hash. So I put in the hash. I put in this file. I just dropped the file onto this page, and it created a hash from the file that I had downloaded. And what I need to now do is look at the hash that was on the website. And if those two hashes match, and in this example, they absolutely do match, then I know the file was downloaded without any corruption. I know that I have the right file. Everything worked perfectly for that particular hashing function. So hopefully this is what you chose. Hashing is used for an integrity check. You're able to know if the integrity of that file was maintained between the time it was on the website and the time that it got onto your device, your computer. And so those of you that chose integrity check got that one absolutely correct. That is the right answer. Integrity check is what we were looking for, and 54% of you answered that one. It would not be a session ID. We don't normally put session IDs on a website page, especially since session IDs change constantly. It would not be a normal thing to lock onto a website page. It would also not be a decryption key. Not much use to put a decryption key out publicly where everybody can see it, because then everybody would be able to decrypt it. And why would you have encrypted it if everyone would be able to decrypt it? It's kind of a useless process at that point. So it would not be a decryption key either. Also would not be the header of the file. Wouldn't really help us to know what the header of the file looked like anyway. So having the file header there is relatively useless. And then a download counter, as we mentioned earlier, we just don't have download counters anymore. We have number of likes, we have number of subscribers, but we don't have download counters anymore. In this case, the one that we were looking for and the thing that we had here that made the most sense, the one that we were trying to find, is indeed this big long thing is a hash. And since it's a hash, it is a check for integrity. If you answered integrity check, 54% of you got that one absolutely right. Now let's do some new questions. I have for you a brand new question that is not multiple choice. Why would I give you a not multiple choice question? Well, that's because on your exam, the first handful of questions you get on your exam will not be multiple choice. Well, what will they be then? They will be anything but multiple choice. CompTIA calls these performance-based questions. They're questions that could be fill in the blank. They might be a matching question. It might be a drag and drop question. You might have to put things in a particular order. It's anything but multiple choice. But fortunately, it's asking you about topics that come from the exam objectives. So the way I look at it, it doesn't matter how they ask the question, As long as you know the exam objectives, you'll be able to answer the question without any problem. And I think you'll be able to answer this one as well. I have for you a performance-based question today. This performance-based question asks, this is more kind of a visual question to look at, from this command line, verify the local router is reachable. That's it. That's the question. So I have for you on the screen, for those of you listening in on the podcast, I have for you on the screen a output that shows the Windows IP configuration and the Ethernet adapter information. And I'm asking from the command line that we see right here, verify the local router is reachable. Now, if you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA and submit what you believe the answer to be. See if you know what it is. A lot of you, I think, will know this one. This is a good troubleshooting step, but make sure you look very carefully at what this happens to be so you get it correct. So have a look and put your answer in. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. So what would you type in at the command line to verify that the local router is reachable? What would it be? That's the real question. I just repeated the question. I gave you no hints there. I just simply repeated what was there on the screen that you've already seen, which I'm sure doesn't help you very much. But there we are. We're at least getting a little something closer to that anyway. So see if you know the answer to this one. If you step through this question, by the way, there's a lot of stuff on the screen. So one of the things I highly recommend is that you go look at every line that's on here and see if you know what all of these things are. Because you could get a question about any one of these many different topics, variables, lists of things, whatever they are on the screen, and you will need to know what they are. I'm asking you one question about one thing here, but it could be a different question about something else that you might have. This will be a good way to check it. See if you know what it is. A lot of you, I think, I'm looking through the answers as they're going by. You can't see them on your screen, but I see them on mine. And I'm seeing a lot of people getting this right. Other people may be a little bit off a little bit. Have to see what that is and see what you would use for that. But there is a very good way to verify that your local router is reachable. At least what I think is a very simple way. We'll have to figure out if it's this way or not. So a number of you locked in your answer. Let's see how we did with this one. We've got a number of things on the screen. I'm going to move my head up here so we can really see what's going on. So we had a lot of things that were sort of in the way there. This is, by the way, an IP config breakdown from Windows. We did an IP config /all, which you can't see at the top here, but that's what I ran to get all of this information put on the screen. So you can see my host name is Professor Messer. The node type is hybrid. IP routing is not enabled. Wins proxy is not enabled. We also have information about the Ethernet adapter. We can see that DHCP is not enabled. Auto configuration is enabled. We've got link local IPv6 addresses. We've got a local IPv4 address. There's a lot of IP addresses here and other things as well. So the question is, from this command line, verify the local router is reachable. Now, why did I choose the name local router? Well, that's because it kind of describes what that device is. The device we're talking about, the device that allows us to communicate outside of this local subnet, is a router. That's what a router does. It allows us to communicate to other IP subnets. For example, you can't talk on the internet unless you have a router to route you to the internet. So this is a good example of how in our industry, a device or a function may have one or two or many names associated with it. And one of the things you have to know about this networking configuration is anytime you're looking for a local router, in the world of IP, the name of that local router is called a default gateway. The default gateway is the name of a local router. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same device. So anytime you see gateway, that's a router. At least in the world of IP networking, that's what a default gateway happens to be. So anytime this computer needs to communicate outside of our local subnet, it will send all of that information to the default gateway. Now, how do you know if the default gateway is up and running? How do you know if it's responding to any type of communication? How do you know it's actually routing? We want to verify that local router is reachable. And one of the easiest ways to do it is to run a ping command. Here is, by the way, let's go back to that first page. You can see the default gateway, its IP address is 10.1.10.1. So a way that you would verify it's reachable is you use the ping command and you ping 10.1.10.1. That's it. And if the gateway is one that is not firewalled and it's not preventing any type of response to these pings, you will see that this command certainly has a lot of different things we can associate with it. And there it is. It's the 10.1.10.1 to be able to troubleshoot what these happen to be. So this is, some of you are saying, this is sort of combining some of the things we learned in Core 1 with Core 2. Yes, it is. Because in Core 2, we have to know about the ipconfig command. We need to understand about the configuration and troubleshooting of these. And this is a pretty good one to know about from the command line. All of your command line stuff is in Core 2. So that's why. All your command line stuff is in Core 2. You'll notice there wasn't a lot of command line stuff in Core 1. That's correct. It was not. All of your networking commands, all of your Windows commands, all of your Linux commands, they are all in Core 2. So that's why we came with the ping command on this one. And you can see this is my local gateway. This is the local gateway in the Professor Messer Studio is 10.1.10.1. And you can see that it does respond, thankfully. If it didn't, we'd be in trouble right now. In fact, you are all able to view this live stream because this entire video feed is going right now through 10.1.10.1. So it's a good thing that this one is up and running. We use that router quite a bit to make that happen. That is an important combo. That question where we wanted to take the command line that was there. Let me back up to that screen. There it is. That's the one I want to show you. So this is a really good example of how a concept behind the commands is used to point you to a command prompt where you have to perform a function. So not an unusual task for a performance-based question. And if you are someone who's working on understanding more about the command line, it's more than just knowing ping does this. Well, that's great, but how do you use ping? How do you take advantage of the functionality of ping? When would you need to use the ping command? And I think this is a really good example of when you might need to use the ping command because you want to check to see if your local router is reachable. It's probably, in fact, if you look at the troubleshooting steps on Core 2, where I talk about networking troubleshooting, you will see the ping command is used quite a bit. So make sure you're familiar with those types of things when it comes to troubleshooting so that you can find the right command, use that command in your exam, and now you've gotten that performance-based question absolutely correct. Well done. Well, that was our performance-based question of the month. Hopefully you were able to get some familiarity with being able to run those types of things. Hopefully now that you're more familiar with ping, you might want to use it to try to ping some things that are on your local network. In fact, why don't you do an ipconfig from your command prompt, find your default gateway, and ping it? Does it respond to you? And in that way, you'd be able to verify that your default gateway is at least turned on. We don't know if it's configured properly. We don't know if it's routing properly. We don't know if other aspects of it are working the way we would expect, but we know it's on the network and we know it's responding to us on the network. So that gives us at least a connectivity check. That's what ping is for. Let's now move away from our performance-based question and let's do more multiple choice-based questions. I have for you this next question on the list, and it asks, a system administrator needs to modify the size of a Windows paging file. Which of the following would provide this option? Would it be Device Manager, Network Properties, Performance Options, Display Settings, or Task Manager? The question again asks, a system administrator needs to modify the size of a Windows paging file. Which of the following would provide this option? Would it be Device Manager, Network Properties, Performance Options, Display Settings, or Task Manager? If you think you know the answer, please know answers in the chat room. Please know hints in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. A number of people were even saying, how would multiple choice questions even work for command line? Well, I guess I could put different command lines in A, B, C, D, or E. I could put ping, I could put traceroute, I could put different IP addresses. In fact, that's what I thought a lot of people would do, is they might know that it was ping, but how do you know what IP address to use? You have to find the right IP. And on that particular screen, there was my local IP address, there was the default gateway IP address, and I made sure, you'll notice, I changed my DNS settings so that there would be 2 more IP addresses that were also different, because I used 1.1.1.1 and 1.0.0.1, which are DNSs over at Cloudflare. Those are very fast DNSs. In fact, I might just leave them that way on that system because they're super fast. And that gave me 4 different IP addresses, and you had to choose the right one. So I did try to complicate it a little bit, made it a little tricky, made it a little difficult, so that you would have to really know what the right IP address would be to choose when you're working on those. All right, so now we have looked at this question. Let's see how you did. The question asks, a system administrator needs to modify the size of a Windows paging file. Which of the following would provide this option? Would it be Device Manager, Network Properties, Performance Options, Display Settings, or Task Manager? Let's see what you chose. And you can see that 39% say it's Performance Options, 26% say it's Display Settings. Already we're a little torn. 15% say it's Device Manager. So 3 of these answers in the double digits. And we almost have double digits for the others because Network Properties and Task Manager both come in just above 9%. So this is a really interesting question because we don't change our paging file very much. In fact, why would you ever change your paging file in Windows? Well, maybe because you got a message on your screen that said, your computer is low on memory. I'm very familiar. So if we're low on physical RAM, those memory modules that are on our motherboard, we have filled them up. We have so many applications running, or we're using a particular application that is just memory hungry, and it has used up all of the available space. Wouldn't it be nice if we could take things we weren't currently using, pull it out of that physical memory, and maybe store it somewhere, just temporarily, so that we can keep working on our primary application? It'll free up some of that memory. And then once we are finished using that very memory heavy program, we can pull those things back out of storage and put them back into memory again. Nobody even knows they were missing. Windows does this for you automatically using the Windows paging file. And if you were to look at your task manager, it may be very clear where the big users of memory happen to be. You should be able to look at the RAM that's in your system and see, well, who knew it was Chrome? It was using all of the memory in my system. In fact, it's using a lot of power. It's got a lot going on that Chrome. So there's probably tabs in my Chrome that I'm not currently using. We could maybe page those out somewhere else so that I have more room to work with. So you may want to increase the virtual memory. That's what we call that storage space on your drive, where you can temporarily store things that you're not actively using in RAM. You just put them on your SSD, put them on your hard drive, and they are stored in the paging file, or what Windows calls virtual memory, on your system. The way that you would do that is you go into the performance settings and virtual memory. This is all in the world of Windows. It's in your system, about, advanced system settings, performance. That's what we were hoping to find. And there's a settings option in there where you can modify the virtual memory. It even tells you a paging file is an area on the hard disk. If you have a hard disk, I guess. I don't think it says SSD if you have an SSD, does it? That Windows uses as if it were RAM. And in fact, the total paging file for this device is currently set to just 1.2 gig, just over a gig. So pretty good. to have that available. And if you need to change it, you can click change and it will give you options. Well, there's a question there. It'll give you options on that change where you can have it set automatically. You can set it lower than what it normally is set to. You can set it higher to what it's normally set to. That's completely up to you, but you can make any type of modification to that you would like. That is all under the performance options. That's exactly what that screen says, performance options. And those of you that answered performance options, that would be 39% of you, got that one absolutely right. Now, it would not be under device manager. That's not where you would normally initially find that particular setting. So there's a lot of things in device manager, but eventually if you drill down into device manager and you went into the system and you went into it, I guess you could eventually find it, but it is not the best way to find that particular option. Performance options is a much more descriptive way to identify where that happens to be. Would not be under network properties. This paging file in the virtual memory is not part of the network. It's part of the operating system. We have display settings. Again, this has nothing to do with your display. It has to do with the memory, the RAM, and the current active applications you are using in RAM. And although we did use Task Manager to look at those statistics, we do not use Task Manager to modify the size of the paging file itself. The way you would do that is under Performance Options. 39% of you chose that option, and indeed, that is exactly what we were hoping to find. Those of you that chose that got it absolutely correct. Well, we did. Let's do another question, one that you've probably already seen because I flipped over to it pretty quick. But here's the next question on our list, and it asks, an IT manager is looking through an MSDS. Which of the following would this manager most likely find? Would they find end user license agreement, network throughput statistics, first aid measures, authentication log, or OS minimum hardware requirements? It's got to be one of those, right? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. The question again asks, an IT manager is looking through an MSDS. Which of the following would this manager most likely find? Would it be an end-user license agreement, network throughput statistics, first aid measures, authentication log, or OS minimum hardware requirements? Lock in your answer at any time with the link on your screen. And in fact, I love folks in the chat room going, I think I know this one. I think I might have this one. And that's always good, isn't it? I always find that if you know it, if you studied and you are prepared and you've gone through this content and you know the exam objectives, it's easy. If you have not studied and gone through the exam objectives and identified all of these different topics and read through the book and watched the videos, and it becomes a trick question, I think, is how it works. I think we always blame the trick question when in fact it should be something very, very, very obvious for us. This one, though, requires that you have a little bit of knowledge in what that is. The IT manager is looking through an MSDS. Okay, what is that? So that's the real step. In fact, many of the exams or many of the topics on your exam are topics that they use abbreviations as part of the process to eventually get you to the answer. Now, notice they're not asking you all of these different questions and saying, what is an MSDS? They didn't ask that. They ask you, why is it MSDS? Which is a different question. And in fact, it's one that really is very indicative of the exam itself, is they really want you to understand what these things are used for. So don't spend a lot of time simply memorizing abbreviations. Spend some time memorizing the abbreviation and then memorizing what that abbreviation does for you, because that's really what will be asked on your exam. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, an IT manager is looking through an MSDS. Which of the following would this manager most likely find? Would it be an end-user license agreement, network throughput statistics, first aid measures, authentication log, and OS minimum hardware requirements? Which one of these could it be? Let's find out what you chose. And we can see that 60% of you say it's first aid measures. Notice that all these answers, by the way, are very different than each other. None of these answers were really associated or had any type of comparison to each other. They were all very different. And that was by design on this question, because I wanted to see if you really knew what an MSDS had in it. And I wanted to be sure there was no mistake about an MSDS. So of course, let's answer the question, what in the world are you talking about MSDS? Is that a Microsoft thing? It is not. The MSDS stands for a Material Safety Data Sheet. That's what an MSDS is. And anytime you get a piece of hardware, there will be somewhere associated with that piece of hardware, either electronically or in a sheet of paper included with the device, this Material Safety Data Sheet. This is a very standardized sheet that gives you information about the hardware. And this is an important thing to know, because sometimes you don't know, is this a dangerous thing? Does it have chemicals inside of it? Is it flammable? Can I throw it out in the normal garbage? Do I need to send it to a different facility to dispose of this? These are important questions. You could start a fire and burn the building down if you don't handle things properly. And I say that sort of flippantly, but that is legitimately what could happen. And on the MSDS, you'll find a lot of different things. You'll find composition of the hardware, product and company information, hazard information, firefighting measures, how you would handle it, how you would store it, and first aid measures, because some of these do have chemicals inside of it. What if you get toner on yourself? What if a battery leaks on you? How do you handle that? What do you do? The information about that's in the MSDS. So it will tell you if there's a hazard. And in fact, it even says right here, you can't even read all of it, but it says first aid measures. It tells you if you have a problem, here's what you can do to protect yourself, which I think is an important thing to know. So make sure you are familiar with the MSDS, the Material Safety Data Sheet. This can be very useful, especially if you get a question like this one, where your manager's looking through this. End-user license agreement can most likely be found in the end-user license agreement. That's its own thing. You don't find that in an MSDS. The MSDS also is a piece of paper. It doesn't have network throughput statistics either. It does not have any log information, authentication or otherwise. And it does not display any type of minimum hardware requirements. That's probably in your user documentation, your user manual. This is a good example of how only one of the answers on here would have ever been applicable. And indeed, first aid measures is what we were looking for. And 60% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. So this is, as you can already tell, the Core 2 exam has a lot of different things inside of it. It is a big exam. And when you combine that with the Core 1, you have to know a lot about a lot of different things. It can be everything from hardware, from security, networking, cloud computing, the network command line. You have to know about MSDS. You have to know about all these different topics. And it can be overwhelming. In fact, if you looked at my training course, which I would say is a very succinct and straightforward training course, it's 137 videos, over 19 hours of content for a succinct training course, one that is built to be efficient. That's a lot of content. And I realize not everybody can go through and watch every single video, even though I would like you to. And not everybody has enough time to go through every single video, although I would like you to be able to do that. Instead, you may want to consider getting something that might help you. And that would be my course notes. My course notes are designed, here's the hardware version of them. Here's the printed physical version of my course notes down here. But I also have the digital version that's on my screen. This digital version has all of the text, all of the tables, all of the important graphics, everything you need to know, all the command line data. So here's your command line information, all in the course notes. They're all in here. So if you're trying to get a summary of every video, all the content of every video, and your hand is starting, you'll notice that it's very difficult to write everything down because your hand starts cramping up and then your pencil breaks and then there's a lot to write down. So I've already written it all down for you. And if you purchase the physical version, the one that I have here, this physical version is identical to the digital version, but it's one that you can take with you. It's printed out in full color. It is what they call perfect bound, which is this this softback binding. And it's designed to have a way that's something a little more portable, more mobile. I will ship that to you, and you can find out more about it on my site. And while you're waiting for this to arrive in the mail, you will have complete access to the digital version as well for no additional cost. Find out more on my website. Go to professormesser.com/1102notes. It's also a great way to support what we do on the website. If you're interested in making sure we continue to make more videos, you want to get another updated course. We're already working. We just finished our Security Plus course. We're working on our new Network Plus course right now. It's a great motivation. Find out more. Go to professormesser.com/1102notes. I think that's a win-win, where you have something you can study for your exam and pass your exam and earn that certification. Also helps you create more videos for the next people down the road. Find out more on the website, professormesser.com/1102notes. Let's do some more questions. This next question comes to us with this query, and it says, which of the following is used to create multiple desktops in Mac OS? Ooh, we have to know about Mac OS as well. We do. You have to know about Windows. You have to know about Linux. You have to know about Mac OS. Which of the following is used to create multiple desktops in Mac OS? Is that Mission Control, Finder, iCloud, Spotlight, or Spaces? All real things. Didn't make up any of those. Those are real Mac OS things. And you'd have to know about all of those Mac OS things when you start working with Mac OS. Which of the following is used to create multiple desktops in Mac OS? Is that Mission Control, Finder, iCloud, Spotlight, or Spaces? If you think you know the answer, go to the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to go directly to that link, lock in what you think the answer might be, and we'll see if you're right or if you are not right. Some of you may already be Mac OS users. This might be an easy one for you. Some of you may have never worked with Mac OS before, but that's okay. We give you everything you need to know in the video series. So we have screenshots, we have an overview. I demonstrate a number of these. It's an easy way to know about Mac OS without having to actually touch Mac OS. But you will be touching Mac OS eventually. Don't fight it. I think a lot of people like to fight operating systems. We talked about this in the pre-show, that if you want to be an IT professional, you need to know as much as you can about Mac OS, about Windows, about Linux, about iOS, about Android, and other operating systems as well. Let's see if you happen to know this one, however. The question again asks, which of the following is used to create multiple desktops in Mac OS? Is that Mission Control, Finder, iCloud, Spotlight, or Spaces? Let's stop the poll and let's see what you chose. We are a bit torn. We have Mission Control at 41%. We have Spaces at 49%. We got a mix of those here. And then everything else is single digits. 4% say Spotlight, 2% say Finder, and 2% say iCloud. So the real question is, what could it be in this list of things? We have to now break this down to be able to really understand what all of these are. So let's have a look, because these two things are very closely related. The two things we chose. We chose Spaces at 49% and Mission Control at 41%. Let's only look at those two. One of the things that's interesting is that you're able to view everything on your screen and sort of roll everything up into one view by looking at Mission Control. In fact, I'm going to show you, for example, I'm going to bring up Mission Control on my computer, and it moves everything off to the side. You can see that I've got a couple of other windows down here that are running, things you can't see behind the scenes. We just looked at my course notes. There they are back behind the scenes. So it's a quick way to kind of move everything back. We can choose what we want from the big list, and then we can bring that thing back to the front if you want to be able to do it that way. But this is all in one desktop. Notice there's an option across the top for a desktop 2. In fact, there's nothing there right now on the desktop 2. There's a desktop 1 and a desktop 2. So under desktop 1 and desktop 2, that's a little bit different. Mission Control spreads things out for you so that you can see what's there. But if you wanted to break down and have multiple desktops, you need to use those options at the top of the screen, and the folks at Apple refer to that as spaces. They create a space of what's there. We have multiple desktops, there's spaces, there's lots to go through. You can create multiples of multiple. You can create a lot more than two. Once you create the second one, you can create a third, you can create a fourth. You can have all these different desktops that are configured in different ways and be able to use those. So you would add those spaces from within Mission Control. So in many ways, I think a number of you that chose Mission Control, you were half correct. You were sort of right, because that at least gets you there. But Mission Control is not multiple desktops. Mission Control just spreads everything out so you can see it. Spaces is the answer we were looking for. About 49% of you chose the answer to that one. Spaces is exactly what we were hoping to find, and that's the answer that we would need to create multiple desktops in macOS. So that is a very good example of working through what may or may not be a challenge with keeping track of macOS names, because Finder is a real thing. Finder is the file manager, if you will, for macOS. So they don't call it File Manager, they call it Finder. We also have iCloud, that is both the description of the Apple cloud-based services, but it is also a functionality within macOS that allows us to connect to iCloud. Just everything is named iCloud, it seems, when it's related to iCloud. And then Spotlight, an actual thing in macOS, that is the, for lack of a better word, that's the find command in macOS. There is a magnifying glass at the top of the screen in macOS. You can't really see it because my screen is way up here, but there is a magnifying glass, there it is, at the top of macOS. That's effectively the Spotlight functionality. And you can just type in a name, a word, and it goes through all of your files. It's already indexed everything, so it can very quickly find things by using that. So in this particular case, though, we were trying to create multiple desktops. The way you would do that is by using the Spaces functionality, which you will find within Mission Control. So I'll give Spaces, you get full credit. Mission Control, folks, I'll give you half credit on that one. Weren't quite there, but now we know the difference, and you'll be able, if you ever use these, to be able to pop open. There's a good view of Mission Control being used, and you can see the spaces at the top of the screen for both of those. In fact, I have two desktops running on that particular system, and all these other things are happening here. Also, I just loaded up a bunch of different apps so we can really see a bunch of things. Usually, actually, I could probably say I got rid of half the apps I normally run just so we can have something on the screen that we could see. So make sure you're familiar with those macOS utilities. That will become very, very important to you as we step through the questions that you might find about macOS. There's a list of those in the exam objectives. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. Now, this is for people who are working on renewing their certification. And if you're collecting these CEUs, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. The way that you can earn this CEU is you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. You click the Contact Us link. Under that Contact Us link, it pops up a form. Put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put June 2024 Core 2. That way I know where this came from. And then in the body of the message, put the super secret code words of the month, Mission Control Spaces. Mission Control Spaces is the super secret code words of the month. Just put them on a line by itself. Really, that would be the best way for you to do this. It makes it very, very simple to find all of that. Hopefully, this is something that you will be patient with me, because it usually takes me about a week to get these back and work with them. So don't worry if you don't immediately get a response back from me. Sometimes I get these back in a day or two. Sometimes it takes a week or so. But don't worry, I will get this back to you. I have a big list. I keep them, and I send them out kind of in batches. Again, you'll go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, professormesser.com, and click the Contact Us link. In the form that comes up, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put June 2024 Core 2. And in the body of the message, put the super secret code words of the month, Mission Control Spaces. Mission Control Spaces is what we were looking for. And then I will send you an email that has been digitally signed, so you know that it really came from me, that certifies that you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. So there you go. That file, people are asking, hey, I've gotten one of these before. What is the attachment that's there? The attachment is the digital signature. So if you are running PGP or GPG or a compatible program, you could run that to verify that everything in that email really did come from me and everything in the email has not been changed. It is the original email that I sent. We refer to that as non-repudiation. And it's just another way to confirm that what you received is really what I sent to you. It may also be a good way for CompTIA to verify that what you received is really what I sent. Another good way to do a little bit of auditing. So that's what that is. The certification part is the email itself. In fact, you'll notice in the email it says, this certifies that, and then the rest of the email is the certification part of it. And that's what CompTIA is really looking for. We have enough time for another question, so I think we should do one. Next on our list is this question that asks, a user in the accounting department can view quarterly revenue reports, but cannot make any changes to the report. Which of the following would describe this situation? Although it looks different on my screen. On my screen, it says, which of the following would match this description? I guess both of these are accurate enough for you to understand what they are. The possible options are access control list, email filtering, least privilege, redundant array, or multi-factor authentication. A user in the accounting department can view quarterly revenue reports but cannot make any changes to the report. Which of the following would match this description, describe this situation, or in some other way answer this question? Would it be access control list, email filtering, least privilege, redundant array, or multi-factor authentication? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See what you think the answer might be. So this would be a good one to try. If you were somebody who is trying to understand the details of what's in these questions and you're trying to break out, where did that come from? Why is he asking that question? What does that particular topic mean? All of these things come from the exam objectives. So stick around. In a few minutes, I'll explain where you can find these exam objectives and download them for free. They are a valuable study tool. You want to be sure you get your hands on those. Could be very good to know about. See if you are familiar with these. This is a pretty good question because it's one that does come directly from the exam objectives. In fact, all of the answers come directly from the exam objectives. So if you think you know the answer, like you've got this one solid. I know the answer to this one. I've locked in my answer. But another thing I will tell you, and another thing that might help you quite a bit, is you may want to also look at the things you did not choose and make sure you know what those are, because those might show up on your exam as a different answer. See if you happen to know. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a user in the accounting department can view quarterly revenue reports, but cannot make any changes to the report. Which of the following would match this description? Is it an access control list, email filtering, least privilege, redundant array, or multi-factor authentication? We'll close the poll and see what you chose. And you can see that not even close. 72% of you believe the answer is least privilege. Everyone else, effectively, about 25% of you answered access control list. So it's really between those two, because if you see multi-factor authentication, that's only 2%, email filtering less than 1%, redundant array 0%. So it's a really good example of how really only two answers here could possibly be the one we were looking for. Let's see what we think the answer is. In fact, we know that 72% say least privilege, 24% say access control list, but the answer is least privilege. Least privilege is a security mechanism where we assign only the rights necessary for someone to be able to do their job. Now, if you've ever worked anywhere that was not following least privilege, you may have found that everybody on the network has admin rights. This is something that unfortunately does happen even today, where you will walk into a small, medium business. Well, it's too hard to set rights and permissions. And somebody can't do something properly, or the application isn't working properly. Just give them admin rights and then everything will work perfectly. which is true. Everything will work perfectly if you give everyone admin rights. It's hard to argue with that. Unfortunately, it also opens the entire organization up for security concerns because now everybody can do everything. And that may not necessarily be what you would like either. It may be very important to keep certain limitations in place for certain employees. In fact, this is a good way to have someone take advantage of those rights and permissions and could potentially do things that are detrimental to the organization. This happens all the time, quite honestly. So the rule of thumb here is do not run with admin privileges. Don't have your users run with admin privileges. You should not be running with admin privileges. Nobody should. You should only use those privileges when administration rights are required and only use those temporarily. So this is important not only to keep people from doing things malicious, it's also important to keep applications from doing things malicious, most particularly malware. If malware got onto a system with admin rights, it would effectively have full control to do whatever it would like to do. And ideally, we would like malware not to have that level of control of a system. So in this case, least privilege is absolutely the answer. 72% of you chose that one. You got it absolutely right. 25% or 24% say it's access control list. Now, why would it not be an access control list? Well, normally we don't use an ACL, or as someone I used to speak with called it, an ACL. Don't call it an ACL. It's an access control list, or ACL. The ACLs are used to decide whether, most generally speaking, this is a network function, or it's a function built into something like a firewall, where it's making a decision on whether a particular bit of traffic on the network should be allowed or not allowed. We don't commonly associate this type of broad control with an access control list. Access control lists are usually very, very specific. But the description we're talking about here is one where a user has just enough rights to do the job they need to do. In this particular case, the user in the accounting department not allowed to make changes to the quarterly revenue reports. In fact, very few people should ever be able to make changes to the quarterly revenue reports. So it's a good example of breaking down and understanding the differences between those two and choosing the one that makes the most sense. And in this particular case, that is clearly describing least privilege. It is not describing an access control list. In fact, nothing about this even says they're communicating through a firewall. They're using an access inside of an operating system. It never even goes that far to make you even think that an ACL would be involved with something like this. Least privilege is the clear winner on this one. It's the one you should have chosen. And 72% of you did a very good job with that one. You chose the right answer for this one. Let's do another. We got time for one more. We'll squeeze another one in. Next question on our list is this one that asks, a technician would like to remove all application data and return Windows to the factory default settings. Which of the following should be selected to configure this system? Would it be uninstall, reset, safe mode, repair, or format? All of these are real things. It could be any one of them. The question again asks, a technician would like to remove all application data and return Windows to the factory default settings. Which of the following should be selected to configure this system? Would it be uninstall, reset, safe mode, repair, or format? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to instead lock it in and see how you do with this question. This is a pretty common one too. This is one where you might want to do this on your system. Maybe you're planning to give the system to someone else. Maybe you would just like to start fresh from the factory default settings. Well, what would you choose to make that happen? There's a lot of different ways to do this on a system and return it to its factory default settings. Let's see if you know what the best answer is in this particular one. Because I think in this case, I think there are at least two answers that could technically be correct, but only one that is really the one. Which of the following should be selected? Which one should you choose? Are you going to do it the easy way or are you going to do it the hard way? We need to do it the easy way. Which one is the easy way? Let's see how you chose. The question again asks, a technician would like to remove all application data and return Windows to the factory default settings. Which of the following should be selected to configure this system? Would it be uninstall, reset, safe mode, repair, or format? And you chose, and 67% of you chose reset. 18% of you chose format. I said we had an easy way and a hard way, and you chose both. So those are the two big ones you chose. You chose both the easy way and the hard way, but which one is which? We'll find out. Repair is 7%, safe mode is 4%, and only 2% of you chose uninstall. So this is, you have to really choose the right one on this one. Let's see what the options are inside of Windows itself. There is an option inside of Windows. You can see it under the apps and features, and the ability to have, in this case, Office, because I was looking at an Office configuration for this particular screen, but it'll work for any app, where you can repair. There's a repair button right here that says, if this app isn't working right, we can try to repair it. The app's data won't be affected, and we can choose the repair option for that. Well, that's good, but that's not what we wanted. We want to delete all application data and return Windows to its factory default settings. That's not what repair does, so that's not our option. Now, if this app isn't working right, you can reset it. Now, it will delete the app data, but at least the application will still be working. And we would use the reset option for that. Again, that wasn't the question. We wanted to get rid of the app. We wanted to get rid of everything except the factory defaults for Windows. So that is a really good example of, well, in this particular case, that is not the one we would choose. Then you have this one at the bottom, which is uninstall, which will uninstall the app and its settings. Documents won't be affected. There's the uninstall option. Not what we want to do either. So none of those can really give us what we would like. But under the reset option, there is an option to be able to perform a factory reset, where it will say, okay, I will delete the app data and everything with the app. You have an option when you choose that to choose the ones that make the most sense for you. And a reset option does exactly that. It resets everything and returns it to a factory default option. Makes it very simple when you're trying to configure a system. Reset, there it is, the ones we would like to choose, reset. And having repair, reset, and uninstall, those are the big differences. Reset is the one we would like to choose. And in fact, that's one most of you chose. 67% of you say the option is reset, and you'd be absolutely correct. Now, 18%, we now know why uninstall and repair aren't the right answer. Safe mode simply starts Windows into a less capable version of Windows, not normally used during troubleshooting. It does not delete application data. It does not return Windows to a factory default. But format, 18% of you chose format, which technically is right if you follow it up with installing Windows manually once you've performed a format. Because when you format a system, it deletes everything. It deletes everything in the partition. So it deletes all of your files. It deletes the operating system. It deletes everything. You can't boot your system after that point, after running a format. So technically you could do format, but you would then have to have your Windows install media on a USB or some other type of media, maybe across the network. And you would have to run the installation program for Windows again to get it back to its factory default settings, or at least something that would be close to factory default. But it's much easier if you just choose the reset option. Then it just does it and you're done. So I mentioned there's an easy way and a hard way. The easy way is reset. The hard way is format. Format, I'm not even giving you half credit for that. You get 0 credit for format. So sorry, not the right answer, because I asked you which of the following should be selected, which is the best option, which is the one you should be doing, and you should be choosing reset. That is the right option. That is the one we wanted to choose. 67% of you chose that option, and that's the one that makes the most sense in this particular example. Hopefully that's given you some ideas of things you can do to help get your system back up and running if it runs into problems. I know we're at the top of the hour, but let's do one more question. I know we have another one on this list. This question is one that comes directly from my practice exams book. Now, if you haven't seen my practice exams book, it looks a lot like this one. This is the Core 1 book that I have in front of me. I haven't unpacked my Core 2 books yet. The Core 1 book and the Core 2 book are identical, except one has a 1 on the front, one has a 2 on the front. Otherwise, they look very, very similar to each other. The Core 2 book is 380 pages with 3 90-question exams. On those exams, there are 5 performance-based questions in each of those 3. So you have 15 performance-based questions in this particular book, along with 85 other performance-based questions 3 times. So there's quite a few questions that you can go through. And let's go through one right now. I've got one on my screen, or I had one on my screen. Here we go. So let's look at question A38. This is from the very first exam, question 38 that's in this book. It's actually on page 14 of my practice exams book. And the question asks, a server administrator is replacing the memory in a database server. Which of the following steps would be followed first? Would you remove the existing memory modules, wear an air filter mask, disconnect all power sources, or connect an ESD strap? Now you have to figure out from there what it is. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. One thing that's nice about this, though, it's a PDF. So if you have a stylus that you can write with, or you can write on the screen, you can use this to highlight things, to write information on the screen itself, because it's a PDF. It's so easy to make that happen. So if you are someone who is wanting to annotate on the screen or on the pages of the book, you can do that, something you can't do in a normal Q&A that you would find on another website. Now, what's interesting about this is the words quick answer and the words the details are actually hot links, because the quick answer, if you just want to know, is it A, B, C, or D, you can simply go to quick answer and it will tell you the answer is A, the answer is B, the answer is C, or the answer is D. But you could also go to page 74, which is the details. Now we're on page 14 now, but I don't want to have to scroll all the way to 74 and then scroll all the way back to where we are on page 14. So I'm just going to click the words, the details, click, and it takes us to page 74 instantly. So now we have the question at the top, and you can see that the answer is C, disconnect all power sources. And I explain, like many Q&A question and answers do, why that is the right answer. Now, the problem I have when I take these is that I always get the question wrong, but a lot of these exams I find online don't tell you why the wrong answers are wrong. And I think that's a great opportunity for learning. I think that's a great opportunity for me to become more familiar with the topic. There's a chance here we need to circle back around. We need to close that loop in the learning process so that we understand why we got it wrong, which also helps us understand why the right answer is right. So in my book, every incorrect answer is documented. So now we understand why remove the existing memory modules is not the right answer, why wearing an air filter mask is not the right answer, and why connecting an ESD strap is not the right answer. So we have some to go with. Now, if you read the question and you just weren't very familiar with the topic of the question, I also have a QR code and a hot link inside the PDF that will take you to the video that helped to create the question to begin with. So if you're not familiar with the technology or the acronyms or any part of the question, you can watch the video first, then take the question to see if you can understand better why the right answer is right and why the wrong answer is wrong. Now, once you're done with this, you've read through it, you understand it, you now have a good grasp of this, you can click the back button. There is a back button in your PDF reader. You may not even know it. And we go back, and now we're back where we started. So you don't have to scroll through this book constantly. You can use the built-in capabilities of your PDF reader to very easily do this. And now we can go to the next question that's on our list. So that is my practice exams book. Hopefully that's given you some ideas of things that might help you with your studies, especially if you're working towards finalizing this, you're ready to take your exam, and you really want to know, am I ready for this exam? This can give you some of that feedback. You can find out more about it at professormesser.com/core2pe. I mentioned earlier that all of the topics we described today came from the Core 2 exam objectives. Those objectives are free to download from the CompTIA website. One of the easiest ways to find it is follow the link on my site. Go to professormesser.com/objectives, and it will take you over to the CompTIA site. Of course, you can go to your favorite search engine, and you can search for CompTIA Exam Objectives. It'll take you right to the page. First link will have you exactly where you need to be. This is a free document. And let me show it to you since we're talking about it. It is extensive in the information that it provides. So for example, if we look at domain 1, which is the first big section, and the subsection 1.1 is identify basic features of Microsoft Windows editions. Windows 10 editions of Home, Pro, Pro for Workstations, and Enterprise. We have to know feature differences, such as the difference between domain access and workgroup, desktop styles and user interface, the availability of remote desktop protocol, RDP, random access memory support limitations, BitLocker, and gpedit.msc. And then we also need to know upgrade paths for in-place upgrades for these Microsoft Windows editions. That's just the first section. And now if you've watched the first videos of my course, you may notice that correlates exactly to the videos that I've created, and that's by design. I follow exactly these objectives because CompTIA follows these objectives on their exam. They very rarely go outside the scope of these objectives, which means if you stick to this list, you will very easily be able to pass your exam because now you know exactly what is expected of you when you walk into that exam. It is all in the exam objectives. A great thing to have. Make sure you use that as before you even start your studies. You should read through this. And before you go to schedule your exam, use this as a final checklist. You can find that link, professormesser.com/objectives. We do one of these study groups every month. We're not done, of course. We've got another hour of Q&A, or at least part of an hour of Q&A that we're going to go through, and we will take your questions in just a moment. But before we do that, I'll remind you that we have one of these already scheduled for next month. You can come back on July 9th and July 11th. We will have our A+ Core 1 and A+ Core 2 study groups ready to go. Of course, we're not done with June yet. If you come back next week, we have our Network Plus study group. And a week after that, we have our Security Plus study group. Although we changed some of the times and dates in June, you'll notice that the Security Plus study group is on, I believe, the 20th instead of the 19th. Usually it's on a Wednesday. This month it's on a Thursday. So check your local settings there. Check your calendar. Go to professormesser.com/calendar to find out more of exactly when the next live event is going to be in your neighborhood. Well, we're not done yet. Although I'm done asking you questions, we're going to do a part where you ask me questions. You can submit a question at any time using the tabs at the top of your screen at professormesser.com/QA. We call it our after show, and we'll switch over to that in just one moment. Don't forget about our practice exams and our course notes. You can find that at professormesser.com/1102success, or simply follow the main menu that's at the top of the Professor Messer website, or if you're on your mobile device, use the hamburger menu to find all of that. We, of course, have our vouchers that are already discounted on our site. You don't need a discount code. You don't need an extension in your browser. You simply visit professormesser.com/vouchers, and you will be able to work through that. I think that's a great place to go if you're trying to save a few bucks when you're ready to take your exam. And don't forget about us on social media. You can find us on Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. Find us on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. Simply type in professormesser.com/ the name of the place you would like to find us. And if we are there, you will find us there. It's an easy way to find out where we might be in social media. Well, that brings us to the end of our first hour of the study group. Thank you so much for being here. Stick around for the after show where you can submit your question and see the questions that others have submitted. I want to thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on the A+ study group. Okay, I'm going to take a sip. Single malt. Okay, now let's switch over to the after show mode. After show mode is where you can now submit your questions to us, or I guess to me. I guess that's the best way to do it. I have a Q&A set up here where you can easily submit those. Let me set up this up so you can see it on your screen. There it is. So what you will want to do is to submit questions at any time. There's a tab at the top of your screen at professormesser.com/QA. And you can, of course, submit those during the live stream, during the pre-show, or as we are going through these questions in the after show. Everything gets submitted over here. So I'm more than happy to go through and find all of those, but I get to look at them. So you may not see them pop up on the screen immediately. I get to sift through a few of these just to see, because I get some great questions. I also get some that are a little unusual sometimes. And although I tell you I will answer pretty much anything, I won't answer everything. So I will have a look. Most of you give fantastic questions though, so we don't have to worry about that. So let's go into some of these, and we'll start with a question from the Anonymous. The Anonymous asks, well, on the screen here, there we go. What advice would you give to someone without a traditional IT background? And you want to go into IT. I have an entry-level position at an MSP and would love some advice to help me prepare. So what's interesting is you have already done the first step that I would probably recommend if you want to get into IT without having a traditional IT background. Here's what's interesting about IT is that if you want to get into IT, there's no single set of credentials that you could choose to go into IT. In fact, if you look at four-year universities, at least in the US or Canada, the four-year universities don't really have a lot of IT-centric programs. They certainly have computer science, which broadly speaking is really programming. It's really application development and hardware development. That's not really IT. IT is after the programs are written. IT is after the hardware is installed. So we're not building hardware in IT. We're not writing applications in IT. We're managing the data. We're protecting the data. We're maintaining the networks. We're keeping everything up and running. We're giving you the tools to access that data and run the applications. That's what we're doing. And so that creates a bit of a problem. If the big universities aren't teaching and training on IT-related topics, where do you get this training? And the answer is that you sort of blend together a lot of training from a lot of different places. Some people have chosen to go the route of private training. There are a lot of private schools out there that have IT programs. So I'm in Florida, and in Florida, in Central Florida, there's Full Sail University. They're a private college. They are accredited, and they have very IT-centric programs. So you can learn cloud computing. You can learn about operating systems. You can get a breakdown on IT support credentials. There is a lot you can do there that has to do specifically with IT functions, and you earn effectively a 4-year degree. They bring you in after your 2-year degree is done, and they give you the last 2 years, and you have that IT degree. There are other schools, and in fact, sometimes you will find a 4-year university. They are unicorns, but you can find them where they do have programs for IT. It's very unusual to find one, but you can find them. A lot of times you find 4-year universities and they'll tell you it's an IT program, but in reality, it's a program that is a computer science program with a heavy emphasis in programming, and they put one class on operating systems in there and they call it IT. That's not IT. That's programming with a little bit of operating system thrown in. So to me, those aren't IT programs. So what do you do? My formal degree, my 4-year degree is in business management. It's not in IT, but my entire career has been IT. It's all been technology. It's been field service technician, desktop support, network administrator, security admin, security systems engineer. Everything I've done has been IT related, but I had no formal IT degree of any kind. So there's an example of how it really doesn't even necessarily matter what your background is. What you really need is some practical experience. Now, this doesn't even have to be professional experience. It just needs to be practical experience. You need to have some familiarity with Windows, with supporting Mac OS, with supporting Linux. Have you even built your own web server before? Have you put a content management system on that web server? Have you loaded a database server on that web server? Have you got all of those things working together? That's a great task. You could do that this afternoon. And then you would have some practical experience on, I loaded up Linux, got it running. I loaded up MySQL. I loaded up WordPress, and I got it all running on its own web server that I can access from another machine's browser, and it all works perfectly. there's a great set of tools and tasks that you could do. So now if you walk into an interview and you say, all right, what experience do you have? Well, I don't have any formal professional experience, but let me tell you about a project I just finished. It's a project you did at home, but let me tell you about a project I just finished with content management systems using Linux, Mac OS, Windows, or whatever you were using MySQL as the database, and then using WordPress as the content management system. And not only did I get that up and running and was able to put things into the content management system, I then set up a process for backing up the system, backing up the data in the database, making an image of the system, and then I deleted everything to see how fast I could restore it and if it would work. So now you're already explaining to somebody all these practical things that they already do in their company. You're just doing it at a different scale with different tools. So those are great conversations to have. You need that type of practical experience. And that's just one thing that you could do today to tell someone that you have some experience doing those types of things. And trust me, you could spend days and weeks learning about managing Linux, learning about managing MySQL. I'm still learning MySQL. I've only been using it for 20 years. I'm still learning it. Learning about WordPress. That's another one I'm still learning. So all of these, it's a constant learning process. That's one thing that is different about IT that I find is different than maybe other types of jobs you would find or other types of vertical markets, is that IT is constant growth. You have to constantly be learning. And this is a good thing because that also means you're marketable all the time. And very often we find ourselves learning these things that nobody else knows. Now suddenly your knowledge is valuable because now you're one of the few people in the world with that knowledge. And certainly an employer will find that very, very interesting if they need that knowledge in their organization. So Anonymous, you mentioned you don't have a traditional IT background. Neither do I. Neither did a lot of people I worked with in IT. I worked with people who were electrical engineers. That sounds technical, but has nothing to do with IT. It is technical, but it has nothing to do with IT. I worked with people that had liberal arts degrees, that had literature degrees, that had a master's in something completely unrelated, and found themselves somehow, and that's sort of how it works for a lot of us, we stumble into IT and suddenly realize, well, I like this. This is fun. I get to solve problems, and they're paying me pretty good. And then you solve more problems and they pay you more. And then you solve even more problems and they pay you a lot more. And you're thinking, do they know that I really like doing this? Let's not tell them. Maybe they won't pay me as much. So that's a really good example of IT being one of these that is a very practical type of position. A lot of people, I think, sometimes describe it as a trade. So they put it into that same category as someone who fixes HVAC systems, someone who is a plumber, someone who is an electrician. Okay, I'm fine with that, by the way, because these are skills that very few people have. And unlike a plumber or an electrician or an HVAC tech, I don't really have a ceiling. I guess technically they don't either. They could start their own businesses and have their own companies and their own people, but you as an individual do not have a ceiling in IT. You can just keep moving up and make six figures and more than six figures, plenty of six figures, multiple six figures in this industry by making that happen. So that's why I tell people you can easily get into IT no matter what you do. And here's the great thing about your question, Anonymous, is that you have an entry-level position at an MSP. That's a managed service provider. For those of you not familiar with the MSP world, MSPs are environments where these are a single company that are supporting many companies, tens, 20s, hundreds of companies out there. And every one of those companies has a different group of applications. They have a different set of goals and objectives. They use different types of hardware. They have different requirements. They have different service levels. Someone who makes widgets will be very different than a company that provides electricity, which will be very different than a company that makes sure that trains run. So this is a really good example. The MSP is a really good example of an environment that is learning a very large amount of information in a very short period of time, because you will be forced. You will be in the middle of the fire constantly. And MSP is just constant motion. MSP, they tend to have a history of a lot of work and very few people to do the work, which I think is exciting. You do learn a lot. A lot of people say you get burned out in an MSP, and I could see how that would be the case, but you're learning so much in such a short period of time that you become very, very, very marketable in a short period of time. So an MSP is a great jumping off point. You learn a lot, stay there a year, stay there 2 years, stay there 3 years. There's always a 3-year rule in IT, by the way. It's kind of an unofficial rule, but it's something that we commonly talk about as the 3-year rule, where you stay somewhere 3 years and then you go to the next job in IT because they pay you better. And then after 3 years there, you go to the next job. So it's the 3-year rule. Back before we had IT, people didn't see bouncing around from job to job. You stayed at one job all the time, and then you retired from that job and you got your pension. Well, it doesn't work that way in IT. In fact, it doesn't work that way in most other jobs these days either. But this is a good example of where you can learn a lot in a very short period of time and then use that knowledge to move up, to level up in the industry where you are now working for someone else, probably less stressful, making more money with more flexibility. One of the things that you'll also find, and I think it's really useful, is an MSP gives you a chance to meet a lot of great people. You're going to not only meet great people at the customer, but you will also meet great people that you work with. So make sure you get on their LinkedIn. You never know when you're going to need to reach out to see if they have an open position in their company. So make sure you follow that up too, because that will be important. That is my advice. My advice, you say you'd love some advice to help you prepare. You're already there. You are already preparing. Right now, you're already there. In fact, there's no preparation. You're in the middle of it. You have an entry-level position in an MSP. Your job right now is to be a sponge. Your job is to soak in as much of this environment as you can, is to enjoy the chaos, is to enjoy the knowledge. Start reading everything you can. Start looking over people's shoulder when they're doing things you don't understand. Start asking questions of them. There's something in this industry that and probably this is just human nature, is we don't tend to speak out when we don't understand something. But I will tell you, if you get accustomed to being the dumbest one in the room, and I don't mean that literally, I mean that as someone who, when you see something you don't understand, you need to be perfectly comfortable saying, "Whoa, what is that? I do not understand what you just did there. What was that? Can you teach that to me? Can you show that to me?" One of the things we love to do in this industry is to show people what we are doing and how it works. This is a very familiar and very comfortable environment because people are not fighting with each other over what you are doing. They are instead more than happy to show you some of these things because it's interesting, not only for them, but also for you. So I tell people all the time, and this is me in a training class. I used to sit in the back of the training class and I used to say nothing. And I would find that I wasn't learning anything. And what I started doing is I started going to the training class and I would sit in the front row. And then I would watch what was going on. And when I didn't understand what was going on, I would, excuse me. I have no idea what you did just there. Could you just back up like 30 seconds and show that again? And they'll back up 30 seconds. They go, "Yeah, here's what we did. It got this from here. Click, 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 click. Boom." Like, okay, now I got it. And what I found was that once we left the room, other people in the class would come up to me and say, "Oh, thank you so much for asking that question. I had no idea what he was doing." Well, why didn't you say something? But we're so uncomfortable admitting we don't know. I'm fine saying I don't know. And maybe that's just being in the industry and not having any fear about what you know and what you don't know. Maybe you get to a point where you've accumulated enough knowledge that you can feel comfortable telling people you don't know something, but there's always something you don't know in this industry. There's way too much to know. Nobody knows everything. And you should surround yourself with people that are very familiar with these things you don't know. And you can use them not only to answer questions, which is very valuable, but they will teach you those things as well. So I think that is great whenever you work through there. A lot of people in the chat room are going, "I find people where I work are they're very closed-minded about this and they won't share anything." Well, that's your cue to go somewhere else where they will. I think if you find places that are very technological centric, they tend to be more open. And a lot of what I did in the later part of my career was working for the manufacturer themselves. So I worked for Network Associates, which at the time was a conglomeration of Network General, the company that made the sniffer, probably familiar with that product, and a company called McAfee. You may have never heard of them. They got merged together and created Network Associates. And hardly any legal problems came of that. And then eventually those two broke up, and it ended up being a divorce, and I ended up going back with Network General at that point. But I worked with Network General, worked with McAfee, worked with at Network Associates, worked with Palo Alto Networks. So I was working with the people that made those products. Well, if you want to know things you don't know, go work for one of those companies, because the people designing those applications, the people creating that hardware, people building that software are very, very smart people. I know it's fun to say, well, it's buggy and this thing doesn't work and what were they thinking? The reality is these are very knowledgeable people who've been doing this a very long time, and they know a lot more than any of us do. Let's see what they have to say. Surround yourself with those folks and you're going to be fine, and have humility enough to say, I don't know. And you will be surprised how quickly you learn, how quickly you move up in this industry. Great question. Let's go to another one on this list. We'll keep going through the ones that we have here. So along those same lines, let's take this follow-up from Wesley, who says, what was your strategy for leveling up your skills and getting promoted / a new higher paying job? There's a mix of these. It's many and varied. A lot of it is about what you learn. And I mentioned my strategy for learning was to be dumb, was to, if I didn't know the answer, I was very quick to say, I don't know the answer. When you're sitting in a room with people and they say, how are we going to get that particular technical thing managed? And they turn to you and go, how do we do? You're the expert in this. How do you do that? Like, I'm the expert in this, and I've never even seen what you're talking about. However, I know somebody who has. Let me go back to them. We're going to put together a strategy, and we'll come back to you and say, this is the right way to do it. So even if you don't know the answer, you should be very comfortable saying, I don't know. Now, when you know the answer, of course, you will tell them, here's how you make that happen. And you should, of course, know more answers than not. I think not knowing anything is probably not your best strategy. But being able to speak up very quickly and not pretending that you know the answer is very important in this industry. You get a lot more respect that way. People prefer you being very honest and upfront and bringing to them the information they need, rather than you pretending you know what the answer happens to be. And that sort of fits that scenario where in the training class, you should sit in the front and tell people, hold your hand up when you don't know something. The other part was that being able to network is important. Not packets, not frames, not routers and switches, but to network with people. This is a bit of a lost art, it seems. It seems that if you look around at people in the industry, I think people in general these days, we tend to not be as direct and personable with each other as we used to be. I don't know if that's something that was created during our COVID shutdowns. I don't know if that was something that was occurring before that. I don't know if it's a change based on how we use the internet, but we don't do a great job in networking people. And I think there's a value there in meeting people in the industry. I know there is. And that was a big part of leveling up my skills and getting promoted. You should go to the Microsoft user group meeting in your area. You should go to the Cisco user group meeting in your area. You should go to the Palo Alto Networks user group meeting in your area. First, it's free. They're happy to have you. Secondly, they usually have good food, sometimes even drink, always a plus. And best of all, you meet great people, because they're not going to be there in after hours unless they're really interested in this technology. And it's a great way to meet people in your area you may have never met before. And these may be people you work with in the future, because it's a small community. And if you work at a hospital, your next job may be at that manufacturing company, and the next job might be at the brewery, and the next job might be at the auto parts plant. The next job might be at a financial company. we're all moving back and forth because it's a 3-year rule. There's constant motion, and usually we stay in the same geographical area. So take advantage of those events. You meet great people, and be comfortable in asking people, hey, I'd love to get on your LinkedIn. Can I send you an invite? They'll go, yeah, of course you can. We'll keep track. We'll see what's up. And that's where you really find a lot of great people. Let me tell you how this works out. Let me tell you a story from my background. And one of the best jobs I ever got was a job I never knew was coming. This was soon after I mentioned earlier that McAfee and Network General had merged, and it didn't go well, and we divorced. So we demerged, we unmerged ourselves and became individual companies again. That's why there's a McAfee, and that's why there's not a Network General. Network General became their own entity for about a year or so, and then was acquired by a company called NetScout. They're based out of the Boston area, and they're very big in the network management field. And they have amazing products, and they're a great company. I was working at the time in technical marketing. So I'd worked in systems engineering. I was doing a lot of technical things. And then I got a job explaining to people these technical things. It was an interesting job. You would effectively fly around the world and tell people about technology, which was interesting, but it wasn't technical, like hands-on technical. It was more like, let me explain to you technical. And out of the blue one day, I get a call from someone I had not spoken with in 5 years, someone I'd worked with very closely as a systems engineer at Network General. In fact, I think we worked together when I was at Network General as a systems engineer. He was one of my customers, and then he eventually came on board and worked as a systems engineer at Network General, and we worked there together. But I hadn't seen him in forever, hadn't talked to him in forever. I think maybe we had sent some emails a few years back. Hadn't really heard from him though. But brilliant fellow, I held him in very high regard. And I was just driving down the road in New Hampshire because I was going somewhere to buy something from the headquarters. I was at headquarters of NetScout. And he says, hey, I'm looking at taking this job at Palo Alto Networks. Have you thought of being an SE? I'd love to have you on board as my systems engineer. Would you be interested in sending me your resume? And I said, no, I'm fine. I'm not looking for a job. And he goes, well, here's what they're doing. Here's what they've got going on. I'm like, never even heard of this company, Palo Alto Networks. What do? They make Palo Altos? Isn't that the name of a city? I knew nothing. In fact, they were nothing. They didn't even have a product they were shipping. And he says, no, they're a startup. And you should see what they're doing because it's really interesting stuff. Nobody else is doing this. Now, if he's the one telling me, if anybody else told me this, I would have never looked into it, but it was him. And I knew him. And if he's saying that, there's got to be something to this. Well, it turns out the next week was a big trade show that Palo Alto Networks was going to be at. I said, let me go over to their booth next week, see what's going on. And I walked over there, met some of the folks, and they said, here's what we're doing. And they showed me their product. And I said, that's like a mock-up, right? That's like in the future, things will work this way. This isn't real, is it? And they go, no, that's real data on this real device running right now on this real network. And I said, this is something the industry has never seen. They go, yeah, we know. That's why we're here. That's what we're doing. I said, I'd love to be part of that. And so out of the blue, just from nowhere, was not expecting it, came this lightning bolt that effectively changed the next 7 years of my life. And so I got into that position. They hired me. They didn't want to. That was a whole nother story there. We can go some other time. Did not want to hire me. They eventually hired me. I think maybe they weren't quite sure, but they hired me. Turns out it worked out okay. And I stayed there 7 years. And we went public, and it was an amazing ride with fantastic people in a job that you just could not duplicate again. One of the best jobs I ever had. And so that was an example of networking with people and talking with people, and having those relationships becomes important. And I after we kind of got in the job and things were going well, and I turned to the person who called me. I said, as we were driving down the road, 'cause we were a pair, we were that 1-2 team. And I said, why did you call me that day? how did you even think to give me a ring? And he said, well, it was years after we worked together. I sent you an email out of the blue because at the time I was managing the frequently asked questions file on Usenet for Ethernet and for Token Ring. But he was asking an Ethernet question. He goes, you manage the Ethernet frequently asked question. This came up in a meeting I was in. What do you think of this question? And so I sort of emailed him back and said, here's what I think. That's an interesting thing. And here's what the Ethernet standard says. And here's what I would probably go with. And here's how I would plan that out. Just send him that answer. And he said, you took the time to send that message back to me. You didn't have to. We had not talked in years. It wasn't part of your job. You just sent me a note because you were being nice. And I remember that. And I said, well, if he's interested enough in doing this and smart enough to know the answer, he'd make a good systems engineer. So let me call him. And it worked out. So you never know where these things lead. You plant a seed and you never know once you leave if a tree ever shows up. But occasionally you walk back and there's an enormous tree there. But you never know what that seed is going to do unless the seed is planted. You have to get it into the ground. So that's why I tell people there's no single strategy. It's a mixture of things. It's a learn a lot, share a lot, and meet as many people as you can. We're not on this earth for very long. You need to do whatever you can to enjoy it while you're here. Make sure you do that. And if you're not, you should probably be doing something else. I've had plenty of those jobs too, where you look around thinking, why am I doing this? This is not the job I should have taken. This was a bad idea. And let's make our life a little bit better by doing something else somewhere else. Sometimes you have to make those hard decisions. Not everything is wine and roses. You have to kind of work through the bad times so that you understand what the good times look like. And that becomes pretty important too. So I am always eternally grateful for that phone call. It definitely changed the direction of what I was doing. And it's remarkable, once you plant the seed, what actually grows from that. Let's do some more questions. We have another one on this list. We were talking earlier about, if you remember, our performance-based question from earlier, where I'm going to bring it up on my screen. I'm going to pull up that performance-based question. If you recall, it was about finding out if your default gateway, or I guess your local router, I called it. It was about finding out if your local router was reachable. You may recall this. In fact, let's have a look at that page. There it is. This is the one we did earlier. From the command line, verify the local router is reachable. And the answer was a ping command to the IP address of the default gateway, which in this case was 10.1.10.1. And in this case, I pinged my default gateway. It responded back with these 4 responses. That's the default in Windows, and said, yes, it's up and running. So we know that it's reachable. So very astutely, ISA says, all right, what if the router has disabled ICMP requests, or in this case, ICMP responses, which I think is what they meant. What if the router has them turned off? Well, if that's the case, you send your ping command and you get no response. So in that particular case, it doesn't help very much if ICMP is disabled. Now, the advantage of your router anyway, or your system that is configured to respond to your pings, is your local gateway. Because your local gateway is on your internal network, it's relatively unusual to find the ICMP disabled, because then you can't use it as a troubleshooting tool. And ICMP is not a huge security concern on your own internal network, but there may be times when you do want to disable ICMP replies and you don't want that to respond to pings. Well, in that case, you will not be using that to be able to determine if your router is accessible or available on the network. You'll get no response, and then the entire question is moot. It's not going to work very well for you at that point. But I think that's another good example, though, of how reading into the question and knowing what you're doing lends itself to asking those additional questions like that one, where, well, what if ICMP is disabled? You won't get a response. And then the question doesn't work. But in our particular case, we didn't talk about ICMP not being available. We were really talking about what if it is, how would you get a response from that? And by the way, you would still use the same command, whether ICMP was enabled or disabled. You just wouldn't really have an answer to the question. Well, it didn't respond back. That can either mean my local gateway is not on the network and accessible, or ICMP is disabled. So you just have one of two things that could be happening there. So I don't know. That's one of those I think that might help quite a bit if you break those down. So let's see more questions that you have. This is more, we won't even put this one on the screen. Another one from Anonymous who says, are prices on the Professor Messer website in US dollars or Canadian dollars? Everything listed on my site is in US dollars. I am in Florida. They are in Florida dollars, which I guess is very similar to the other dollars in the United States. The US dollars are there. When you check out, it is supposed to recognize that you are in Canada, and the number that you see during checkout is supposed to show you Canadian dollars, as I have configured it. Will it show that to you? I guess that kind of depends on how it determines where you are. It does a pretty good job of figuring that out, actually. But keep in mind that the numbers you see on my site, if it says that it's $50, that's $50 US. So in Canada, I don't know, what's the math there? Like $65, $70, whatever it is. Whatever the difference in the rates are, I don't keep up with it because it all happens automatically on my side. So also make sure that if you're paying for something in US dollars and you're in Canada, make sure that whatever method you're using to pay for that doesn't charge you extra for the difference in currency. Sometimes there's a currency exchange rate overhead. There's some monies they want out of that. And that's why we have cryptocurrency, quite honestly. But I don't support cryptocurrency on my site, at least not at the moment. So right now, you either purchase it in your local amount of dollars, Canadian, whatever you're using as your local currency, and that it makes the conversion as part of your purchase. But everything that you see listed on my site is listed in US dollars. Other questions, let's keep going. Other things that we have on the list. Other options. Here's a pretty good one. This is more of a practical question. We're trying to figure out the best and most cost-effective way of taking the exam. This question's from MC. Yo, MC. MC says, do you think a resit exam, that would be a retake, is worth paying for? And currently, it does not appear to be that way. It does not appear to work that way. We don't have that option. At least financially, it doesn't appear to work that way. Let's have a look at the CompTIA website, and I will tell you why that is. Here's this fellow. Looking good there, fellow. You working? Working hard. Let's go over to the store, though. Do we have a link to the store here? There probably is one. There it is, right there. You can't see it. It's behind my head. But there is one. I'm going to click that store link. So we're in the CompTIA store. This is where you would purchase a voucher if you wanted to pay full price. Let's browse through their certification vouchers. And they put up here, there's an A+ voucher here and an A+ voucher retake. So let's look at these prices. We have, for example, an A+ voucher is $253. But what if we fail that first exam? Wouldn't it be great if we could just take the exam again? And we could buy instead an A+ voucher and a retake, which, by the way, you can only retake the exam you just failed. And if you pass the exam, the retake is worthless. That is by itself, a voucher is $253. The retake is $507. What? Doing the math here. So the retake is the same as if I bought two vouchers, effectively. In fact, it's more. It's less if you just buy two vouchers. The single A+ voucher can be used for either or both exams. So you buy a voucher. One voucher is good for one exam sitting. So you buy one A+ voucher, you can take one exam. You buy two A+ vouchers, you can take both A+ exams. Now, if you fail the first exam, you still have an extra voucher. You can just use that voucher and take the exam again. And you're really out no money because the pricing on these is just double. I'm not sure why they did this. Normally, before the beginning of the year, this had a bit of a discount and it made sense. Now it makes no sense. This is a horrible purchase, actually. This is a bad buy. Why would you purchase a voucher with a retake? Because if you pass the exam, you've now spent $507 for one voucher because you can't use the retake on a separate exam. That makes no sense. Why wouldn't you just buy one A+ voucher? If you fail, buy another A+ voucher. If you don't fail, buy another A+ voucher for the next exam. Doesn't make no sense. It's weird what they did. I don't know why they did that. I'm not asking a lot of questions. I'm not in charge of their store. But I would say, based on the question you asked, which was, should you pay for the retake? I would say at this point, as those prices sit here today, no. Why would you do that? It's a horrible purchase. It's a very bad financial decision. Just buy individual vouchers and you'll be fine. And if you're in the US, Canada, or the US territories, you should really be buying them from my site. It's the same vouchers that you would get on the CompTIA site, but there's a discount. You save some money. And in fact, that one on the CompTIA website, A+ was $253, right? So if you go to professormesser.com/vouchers and we choose A+, thank you for the ad, Google. Appreciate that. Instead of $253, it's $227. So $26. That's a difference of $26. If you're buying two of them, there can be some real benefit there. So that's why I tell you, don't buy a retake these days unless they change their pricing dramatically and really make it an insurance policy. There's no reason to buy the retakes currently, at least in that particular scenario. Your mileage may vary. Oh, good. Let's have a question we can fight about stuff. This is a good one. This question about fighting about things comes to us from Anonymous. Anonymous says, when it comes to all the operating systems, which one uses the most resources and why? This is one just to rile everyone up. This has nothing to do with operating systems or which operating system is better or worse than the other. This question is about how can we fight about operating systems, which I have to tell you, in the world of IT, there's nothing more pointless. Maybe the only more pointless thing is fighting about the OSI model. Or is the OSI model better than the TCP/IP model? Discuss. That's a waste of your time. This is also a waste of your time. When it comes to all the operating systems, which one uses the most resources and why? And the answer is because it's obvious it's Windows. Next question. No, it's not true. Every operating system is good at certain things. Some operating systems are better than others. Some operating systems are more valuable for certain tasks than others. Linux might be better as a web server than other operating systems. Mac OS might be better as a content management system than others. Windows might be better at office management or management of very large-scale implementations. Windows beats all of them. Having Active Directory is something that is an enormous, significant advantage that is very different than anything else. So I think that's a good example of why, if you are ever looking at an operating system and you're having a conversation with someone and fighting about what's better or worse than something in an operating system, it's an interesting conversation, I guess, but ultimately relatively pointless. Every operating system has its value, and I know because I use all of them. I use Linux. If you're on professormesser.com right now, you're on Linux. If you've watched anything that we've done today on this console, on the screen that we're looking at, this screen and the system that I'm using is all Mac OS. In fact, I don't even know my audio system, my mixer, technically speaking, running Linux on the inside. I'm not sure what the streaming system runs. It may not even be any of those operating systems. It may be a real-time operating system. I don't know. And then I have other systems that I use with Windows, and other people that work for me use things in Windows. So that's one of those situations where every operating system has value and is better or worse at certain things than others. And I guess fighting about it's interesting, but it doesn't really help very much. So I don't think there's really a good answer to that one other than let's fight about it. relatively pointless. Other questions that we have here. The question was not pointless, but the answer was pointless. It's interesting in itself just to think about. Other things that we have here. The others that we have are a lot of good questions coming in, by the way. Another voucher question, since we're here and talking about vouchers. This is from Edwin, who says, "Hey, Professor Messer, my new follower. Regarding your vouchers, is the 227 priced voucher only good for one of the core exams, or is the price for taking both of the core exams?" One of the things you'll notice is the pricing that we have there for those two exams is really set up to be one voucher for one exam. One voucher is good for one exam sitting. That's it. That's it. That's all you get to do with it. So there's really no other way to configure it. That one voucher, once you set your exam schedule, once you pay for the exam with your voucher, the voucher suddenly disappears. It turns into the dust. It is gone. It evaporates. The voucher is no longer useful. You've just used it to purchase your exam. So if let's say you pass that exam, you need to take another exam, you need another voucher. Let's say you don't pass that exam. You failed the exam. Oh, so close. But I'm ready to take it again. You still need another voucher. So next time you sit for the exam, you always need another voucher. Now, the only difference is if you had a retake voucher. Let's say you made the bad decision of purchasing a retake voucher and you failed the first exam. You would use that same voucher code to take the exam again because that retake voucher is set up to do that. But you have to take the same exam again on the retake. You can't take one exam, fail it, and then use the retake on something different. That doesn't work. And that's why it's a bad deal. That's why you shouldn't use it. Next question on our list. Let's keep going through here. I am tight of time because I have a kind of a hard stop at the top of the hour. So we are going to get through at least one more on our list. And break these down. This is so many good questions here. I'm going to really rush through two of these because I like both of these that are on the list. Question from Anonymous who says, "I like to troubleshoot issues and fix them. Which IT career would be best for me?" Any of them. That's all we do in IT. In fact, I think IT is full of people that like to solve problems. That's all we do every day. It might be a technical problem we're solving. It might be a broad implementation problem we're solving. It might be that we're planning to implement a system. We need to solve that problem. IT is nothing but solving problems. If you don't like to solve problems, you are in the wrong field because this field, all we do is solve problems. In fact, I would say that we love solving problems. There's something about what we like is solving problems in this industry. And it's something we spend a lot of time working towards. It gives us satisfaction when we solve an issue. There's nothing better than having something nobody's ever seen before. You're looking at an issue, then you start diving into it. You start looking at the internals of what's going on. You start thinking about it. You're in the shower one night, one morning, and think, wait, what if it's something has to do with it? I'm going to go look at that. And you go sit down at that computer and you break down what you saw or what you thought about, and that was it. And by making a few changes on the system, you've suddenly solved that problem. There's no better feeling than the process. I mean, ultimately, fixing it is nice, but I think it's the journey that we enjoy the most. Knowing how to solve a problem instantly, it has value to our employer, but it's not personally gratifying. We like to be able to work through the problem, and the more complicated and weird it is, the better, because we like to talk about those over drinks with everybody else who has to deal with this stuff. So that's what I would say. We love solving problems. That's what we do in this industry. And if you are not a problem solver, you're probably not on this live stream. Put it that way. The other question that's here, we'll focus on, what's the best way to ensure we have enough time to answer the questions on the exam before the timer runs out? Well, first you need to read really, really fast. It's all about time management. You get a maximum of 90 questions on this exam, and you get 90 minutes. Now, if you do the math, it's a minute a question. Just figured it out. So it's 1 minute for every question. It's not a lot of time. And some questions are certainly going to take longer than a minute for you to work through, which means other questions need to take less than that. Now, fortunately, many of the exams, you will get fewer than 90 questions, thankfully. But time management's an important part of this exam. There's a clock at the top of the screen constantly running, so you always know how much time you have left. There's a couple things you can do from a strategy perspective. One is that every question on the exam allows you to mark it. There's a little button, a little checkbox up at the top where you can mark the question. It's kind of like putting a little flag on it. So if you're looking at a question, you think to yourself, I have no idea what they're talking about, but the clock is running. Mark that one. We'll come back to it. Next question. Now, fortunately, the CompTIA exam allows you to mark a question, go do something else, and then you can jump back to any other question at any time during the CompTIA exam. They're not all like that. So that's an important thing to consider. If you were taking a Cisco exam, that has to be taken one question after the other, and you can't go back. You have to submit the answer every time. So if you submit it, this is the worst if you're taking a Cisco exam. You answer the question, you hit submit, and then you go, oh, that was wrong. Wait, no, it was I can't go back. Can't go back. So that's the problem with the Cisco exams. Fortunately on CompTIA, you can go to the next question. You go, oh, wait, I remember now. And you can go back and do that. Now, if you've marked the question, you can keep taking your exam. In fact, what you'll often find is future questions jog the memory or might even answer the answer is in the other question that allows you to go back in time, back to the previous question and answer it correctly, which is kind of nice too. So marking them is a great tool for time management because you can I'll come back to it, click, come back to it. I use the mark question, the flagging of the question, as a way to verify that I really knew the answer. So for me, I use it as a 100% mark. If I knew 100% that I got that question right, that there's no way I would ever change the answer to that, I just keep going. But if I think I'm 90% sure I got that one right, but maybe I don't, I'll mark it. So at the end of my exam, more than half the exam is marked, quite honestly. So I go through it really, really quick. So it depends on how you do these exams. If you're more of a slower, more methodical reader and you really spend time with every question, you may not want to follow that strategy. You may only want to mark it when you really need to come back to it. That's up to you. Time management is an issue and you need to think about that as you go through this. Use that way to mark the question as you are going through them. Some people will skip over the performance-based questions at the beginning. They tend to take more time. So they'll skip over those 5 or so questions. They'll do all the multiple choice, then they'll circle back, but you have to make sure you spend enough time. So use the clock, use the mark function, skip over certain sections if you must, but always keep your eye on the clock. And I think that's an important one to consider. We want you to be successful on this exam. You need to be very familiar with the clock. Use that. If you're doing any sample exams like the ones in my book, get a timer, set the stopwatch on your phone, set it for 90 minutes, go, and go through an entire exam and see how you do. And then you'll be able to decide, that took longer than I thought. Maybe I should speed this up somehow. Or maybe you got all the way through it and you realize, wow, I got 15 minutes left. Now let's go back through. In fact, if you have a chance to go back through the questions, if there's time left over, I use all 90 minutes. Even if I was able to finish the exam in 45 minutes, which never happens. But let's say you finished in 45 minutes. I go back to the very first question. I go through the entire exam again, whether I marked it or not, because I got 45 minutes left. I go through every question again. Sometimes I find a question that said not somewhere in the question, but I didn't read not, and it changes the answer. Like, whoa, I just found one I got wrong. Click, got that one right now. What I never do, and most of us probably should not do, is second guess ourselves. Now, if we answered a question, we see the question, we don't really know the answer, but we really think it's that. And we come back to it and you go, well, I don't know. We could have answered B, maybe. I just never change it. I go with what I went with the first time. I say to myself, my gut felt it was that. That's the one I'm going with. Because if you don't know, you just don't know anyway. Changing it's not going to help you at this point. Just go with what you thought it was the first time. And that's where I stick with that one. So I think if you are someone who is worried about time, you should plan for this. You should try some 90 question sample exams. You should set the clock. You should be already familiar with the flagging or marking function. And you should always know that clock is at the top of the screen. And I think you'll be fine. That's the real key. Well, I think that brings us to what must be the end of many other questions. There's so many other great questions in here. Thank you so much for submitting these. These are fantastic ones that are here. Thank you so much for being here in the first hour as well. If you enjoyed this video, we would love it if you gave it a thumbs up. If you subscribe to our channel, it would just be amazing. It's a great way to support what we do here. We're working towards our 1 million subscriber mark, and we'd love for you to be part of that. All you have to do is go to ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's plenty more that we have coming up. Join us next week for our Network Plus study group. It'll be on Wednesday of next week. If that changes, it'll be in our calendar. Always check the calendar for the next live event at ProfessorMesser.com/calendar. We also have an events channel on our Discord. That's where I will be after this. Head on over to our Discord at ProfessorMesser.com/Discord. Thank you so much for being here. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.